Alright, this is a video I've been keeping in my back pocket for a while. Just in the past several months, the political commentator Razorfist has embraced Christianity and shown fervor about it, especially in his tweets on X. Unfortunately, it seems that the development of his beliefs has led him to embrace some embarrassingly wrong positions on science, which particular members of his audience are all too eager to support. I personally find this disappointing because I rather like Razor and often find his thoughts on politics to be some of the more reasonable ones I come across. With all that said, here's three lowlights from a Razorforce offensive stream that took place back on the October 9th of this year.
Intrinsic Dark, explain to an atheist that his beliefs are faith-based. There's an element of that that's true, yeah.
Okay, barely 10 words in and we already have a problem. The term faith has a lot of the same issues as technical terms from scientific fields do. It has a specific meaning in the context of religion and a conversational meaning outside of that. Generally, when irreligious people speak of faith in the context of religion, they are using the specific definition of faith, which is something like this: the assumption of truth of a belief which is not derived from or connected to any measurements of or information derived from the world outside the human mind. This definition of faith very clearly shows why it is not scientific in nature and not based on evidence. The informal usage of faith as a synonym for trust is very often used by religious apologists in this context to perform a Motte and Bailey fallacy, where a non-evidence based assertion of truth is equivocated with a pragmatic trust of an evidence-based assertion. So, overall, no, there is no truth in the statement that an atheist's beliefs are faith-based, even when we ignore the fact that atheism does not entail any particular belief.
Christians have faith that the Bible is true, and atheists have faith that materialistic nihilism is true. Both are making faith-based statements. Well, I would make the less elevated claim that there are unsubstantiated claims of science that atheists take on faith, and by necessity have to take on faith.
And there was the equivocation. On to Intrinsic Dark. Beyond what I said before about atheism not implying any particular belief, not believing in some purpose assigned by a particular religion's deity does not automatically make one a nihilist. Nihilism, along with most any school of philosophical thought, is not a default state of humans. Atheists are also not restrained to being materialists or even monist materialists, as I suspect the chatter is implying. Non-belief in deities doesn't stop the belief in any other supernatural thing, or a belief that the world contains more than just material things. Now, as for faith being associated with what is true, this is where the super chat really just turns into gibberish. Truth values are only applicable to objective judgments, which always include some statement about reality outside the human mind. Faith is completely internal to human mental states, which makes it inherently subjective. Claiming to have faith that something is true is at best meaningless, because the state of someone's mind has no influence on how the external world works. Amusingly, the assertion that the world is at least in part material is a self-attesting truth. So even if the two sides were materialistic nihilism versus the Bible, the view that atheists supposedly hold already has a more substantial philosophical foundation to it.
There's all kinds of crazy theories that haven't been proven. Like, on paper, dark matter is a thing. Has it been proven? No. No, it's a theorem. Right? There's a lot of stuff in science that is that. And so there's an element of faith incumbent in science.
While this might come off as nitpicking, I do think it's important to understand that terms used in a technical manner in science have a very specific definition, while those same words can have different uses in everyday language. What Razor refers to here as a theorem is actually a set of hypotheses. a theorem is not even a term used in the fields of science he's discussing. That's a mathematical term for a logically correct statement. I assume this was a slip of the tongue and he meant to say theory instead. Though that is also something different, being a set of hypotheses affirmed by experiment, which explains some natural phenomenon.
You can say there's certain things that point to it, right? But how is that any different from, well, Ares pulled the sun with a flaming chariot. See, I have signs that that is true. Anyways.
I have no idea what that was supposed to mean. Next section. All right.
Navanad Semaj, I simply reject out of hand the idea we are but randomly generated bags of meat and chemicals reacting to stimuli. Life cannot be that stupid.
I don't like it, therefore it's wrong. Great standard.
You know, I saw a regurgitation of an argument that I used to make back when I was quite a bit younger, like in high school. I read this fantastic book on the Christian argument, the Christian answers, really more of apologetics in an age of, evolution and Darwinism and such. And one of the extrapolations of that was the human eyeball, which makes no evolutionary sense. The human eyeball makes no evolutionary sense. And I saw there was a video that just went viral this week making that same argument from like a Chinese guy or a Korean guy who was talking about how, until the eyeball, the long and short of it is, until the eyeball is fully formed, you've got a hollow socket that's a giant vulnerability to predators. And until the eyeball is fully formed, it's just this appendage that would be like, there's no evolutionary basis. Nothing about it makes any sense from the standard Darwinist understanding of evolution.
Well, regurgitation is definitely a choice word here, given the amount of time many dumber religious apologists have puked up this argument. The assertion that the human eye or any particular organ is not compatible with evolution is a very old and really weak argument against the validity of evolutionary biology. In general, the concept of some part of a living creature being too complicated for or otherwise unachievable to reach via selective pressures acting on a population of creatures is called irreducible complexity. Every last example of this concept used in argumentation misses a very important point: the fact that body parts can and do have multiple uses at every stage of specialization. These uses may be different from the current specialized version, but they still give the population that has them some advantage against the selective pressures of their environment. Now, I'm frankly astonished Razor takes this argument of the eye socket needing to have the eye evolve into it seriously in the slightest. Given how we watch human infants grow, why would anyone ever assume that the eye and socket grew separately? It's quite obvious that interdependent body parts change together while a specific person is growing, so there is absolutely no reason to assume this ever was or could be different for either direct human ancestors or some other species. I could also point out the differences between Darwinism and the modern extended evolutionary synthesis regarding evolutionary biology, but to be fair to Razor, everything he specifically mentioned was applicable to the Darwinist model of evolution. I will, however, suggest that religious apologists would do well to recognize that pushing against Darwinism is fighting a ghost, in the sense that Darwinism hasn't been the state of evolutionary biology for over 100 years now.
Right. I'm really summarizing the argument, by the way. They make some very specific claims and support them with scientific evidence. But I was fascinated to see that people like that argument is actually making the rounds. It's funny. I made that same argument in.
Well, look, it's perfectly fine that this is a summary of an argument, but given that the basic error associated with it, no amount of scientific evidence is going to fix that. I suspect the evidence referred to is itself incredibly flawed, but I can't say that with certainty since I've no idea what it is.
In I was in a philosophy class with this super commie professor guy. Like, oh my gosh, this guy was so communist. He was in the news. He was like a national news story because he had been taped talking shit about Republicans and calling for their deaths. And
Jesus.
and I used to debate this guy all the time. The whole class degenerated into the Razorfist debates the professor hour. And I made those same arguments. We went back and forth about evolution and the human eyeball. It was funny. He was not pleased with me. He was pleased.
I'd venture a guess that the professor might have had some reason to be annoyed about the topic of evolution coming up repeatedly, given that he was apparently supposed to be teaching a class on philosophy. On to the final section.
Saying. All I'm saying. Copperhead snake. Earth is 4.54 billion years old. Human history is around 25,000 years old, or what I've told Earth's history. During that time, no other intelligent beings, much less industrialized, appeared. Random chance, my ass. Well, Godspeed.
Intelligence is a very complicated topic, especially as we currently have no theory of mind. That said, the activities of a surprisingly large subsection of animals have some aspect of what we could consider intelligence, whether that be complex verbal communications, usage of tools to modify their environment, or even usage of structures to protect their living space. Intelligence in the combination and scale humans have is unusual, but hardly inexplicable given that we have the known ancient hominin fossils have been found that have a steady progression of growing skull casings for their brain. In addition to this, there is effort being made to see if we might find evidence of previous creatures with intelligence rather equivalent to ours, most notably with exploration of the Silurian hypothesis, for example. This isn't to say that there were intelligent creatures that existed and died off before humans, but it is a good indication that we actually don't know for sure, and that there wasn't such a creature, a group of creatures at any time before us. At any rate, that chatter's argument was based on the assumption that unlikely complexity implies a supernatural intervention, which we don't have evidence of.
David Berlinski is a mathematician who argues the current evolutionary understanding does not compute mathematically. The timescales don't work out, so our understanding's obviously incomplete. A lot of what we...
The assessment of a singular person doesn't undermine an entire field of study, especially one as well supported as modern evolutionary biology. Also, science is, due to its structure, always incomplete as an explanation of the world because the amount of phenomena in the world are essentially infinite in number. On top of that, science is not capable of absolute certainty on any specific explanation of a phenomenon. It can only supply ones which are true to an arbitrarily high statistical likelihood. This is, of course, still infinitely better than any religion, which cannot give a reproducible, testable prediction of any natural phenomenon.
We understand to be sort of ironclad science is not complete. You and I, Taryn, talk about like the fossil record.
Yeah.
And how many charlatans there were in the early days of archaeology. There was a whole lot of snake oil salesmen who were finding dinosaurs in the desert because it was becoming very lucrative to sell these fossils to museums. There is no doubt in my mind, at least some of the dinosaurs in museums are straight up fake. Like some shitbag snake oil salesman wanted to sell them those fossils. It was too much of a scandal to admit that it was fake. They're still in there. Some of them. Because there was a whole cottage industry around that kind of, and that's just one example.
It's hard to comment on some non-specific hoaxed dinosaur fossils, especially ones apparently found some 100+ years ago. The only point that can be made on this in particular is that the well-known hoax fossils were exposed by people who had actually studied the relevant science and were looking to present the truth. I'll also mention the question of motivation in exposing the hoaxes, although to be clear, Razor did not claim this. While some of the hoax exposers were certainly religious, connecting their religious beliefs with the motivation to correct inaccurate information in science would be quite a stretch and probably unprovable. To my knowledge, there are no fossils of dinosaurs on display at science museums which are created entirely from the imagination of some person. And this statement is actually quite pernicious and misleading, because what is true is that many of the displays in museums don't contain pieces dug up from the ground. Dinosaur fossils, especially ones that are mostly complete, are exceedingly rare, so the person or group that finds and owns such a fossil will make cast replicas of it and sell these to institutions for use in display and teaching. These replicas are always checked for accuracy and quality of material before they are distributed, so they're not fake in the sense of a hoax find. As for those bones which have not been found with any specimen of a particular species, the form and size of these are inferred from a variety of sources, including any contact surfaces on available fossils, bones of sufficiently similar function and location in any fossils of closely related species, and digital models that test the stability of the creature. It is possible that some of these reconstructed bones are wrong, but without further evidence from more fossils, we simply don't know. Scientists can and do make entire careers out of proving some current discovery to be incorrect or so badly misunderstood to be inapplicable to current theory. When National Geographic distributed news of a fossil that turned out to be a hoax built piecemeal from genuine fossils of other creatures, they retracted the story and published a full investigation of how the fossil managed to slip through their review process. National Geographic isn't even a scientific journal. It's a news and entertainment outlet, yet even they were able to perform due diligence on a faked fossil. It is preposterous to say that a museum would not remove a hoax fossil after discovering it was such because of the embarrassment of the situation.
Not everything that you've been told, like I'm not saying it's all like a foundation of sand or anything, but some of the stuff that you think is ironclad science isn't necessarily.
Yeah, the truth is we don't know shit because the history of the Earth goes back so far.
Mm-hmm.
Like that previous super chatter said, how do you know we were the only ones?
Yeah.
The way that how many floods there have been, the volcanic eruptions, the way the continents shift, that shit could have been buried tens of millions of years ago.
Yeah.
How would you even know? If humanity ended today, in a million years, do you think there'd be any evidence left?
Right.
Entire cities would be ground to dust.
Well, Terran's input here is hardly helpful to the case. He seems totally unaware that thanks to geology, we know quite well what the remnants of catastrophic events look like, and so could correct for those in our search of the geologic record. In addition, the questions he asks imply that it is claimed in some area of science that humans are the only intelligent species to have ever existed. I do not believe such a claim has ever been presented by any scientist as a hypothesis in their field of study, so until I'm presented with one, I'm gonna just dismiss that out of hand. Now, these four slices of interaction are a sample of the very unfortunate way in which religious dogma and personal unwillingness to learn about some topic are combining in our culture. We have seen that a societal baseline for morality is incredibly important thanks to the last events of the last 15 years, but we can't sacrifice a proper understanding of how the real world works to achieve that. I think that people who show great capability in some particular field of human knowledge, like Razorfist, are more than capable of understanding what is true in science and why science and religion don't conflict with each other. Knowing those is the key to having a society which can be both moral and pragmatic.